I woke up at 5:47 in the morning to a sound so violent it felt like the house itself had been kicked in the ribs. A fully loaded Peterbilt was screaming through the dark, engine wide open, diesel smoke rolling thick enough to sting the back of my throat. And before my brain had even caught up, that truck back straight through the south wall of my barn. My grandfather built that barn by hand in 1962, board by board, beam by beam, cedar and sweat and stubbornness. And standing out there in the dust, in a pink bathrobe and bunny slippers like she was enjoying a front row seat at a county fair, was the president of the HOA, smiling at me like she'd finally found a legal excuse to become a demolition crew. She looked me dead in the eye and yelled, "Your farm shouldn't even exist here anymore. Consider this a favor. You ever hear something so crazy your anger has to stand in line behind disbelief?" That was me, standing there in my socks, feeling the crash in my teeth, looking through a cloud of splintered cedar and diesel haze at a woman who had spent almost 2 years trying to erase my family and had finally decided subtlety was taking too long. My name is Delmont Briggs. Most folks call me Del if they've earned it. I'm a third-generation farmer in Harlan County, Tennessee. My grandfather Amos carved our place out of rough ridge land in the late 1940s. My father kept it alive. Then it came to me, 40 acres, a pond, 2 hay fields, a roadside produce stand, around 30 black Angus cattle, and that cedar barn my grandfather built when my dad was still a young man with good knees and bad ideas. I never had some romantic dream about farming. It wasn't like that. I just never found a reason to leave. There's a difference. The land fit me. The work made sense. The older I got, the more I understood that some places don't just belong to a family on paper. They shape the family that lives there. The trouble started when a developer bought the land along my eastern fence and threw up a subdivision. 42 houses, vinyl siding, 2-car garages, a brick entrance sign, trying real hard to look important. They called it Ridge View Estates. Then they did what people like that always do. They wrapped the whole thing in bylaws, fees, committees, petty little rules, and crowned it with an HOA. Now, my farm was next to their development, but it was never inside it. My land had been there for about 60 years before their first mailbox got planted. I never joined the HOA, never paid a dime, never stepped foot in their community room. For a while, that was enough. Then Vivian Marshall moved into the corner lot nearest my fence. Vivian was a retired HR manager from Knoxville, twice divorced, always pressed, always perfumed, always holding a clipboard like it was proof of moral superiority. Within 6 months, she had herself elected HOA president, and according to my neighbor Bertram, she spent her very first meeting asking questions about my farm. I should have paid closer attention to that. The first shot came in a certified letter on fancy HOA stationery with a gold seal she had clearly designed for herself. It accused me of agricultural odor nuisance, visual blight, and unauthorized commercial activity because of my roadside produce stand. I stood there in my kitchen reading it while the cattle were bawling out in the pasture, and the whole place smelled like dew, hay, and coffee. I taped her letter to the equipment shed and went about my day. That was my mistake. Not because I was wrong. I wasn't. I had the zoning. I had the permits. The HOA had exactly zero authority over my land. My mistake was thinking facts alone could stop somebody whose real issue wasn't the law. It was control. Over the next 14 months, Vivian turned county bureaucracy into a hobby. Anonymous complaints started hitting the zoning office every few weeks. Setback violations, unpermitted electrical work, drainage problems. Every complaint triggered an inspection, because once somebody files one, the county has to go look. I had 12 inspection visits in 10 months. 12. They found 0 violations, every single time. By the 7th visit, Howard Cobb, the county's chief inspector, pulled me aside and said, "Son, whoever's doing this is spending more on postage than your farm is worth in citations." That line almost made me laugh. Almost. What Vivian's harassment actually did, though she probably never meant it to, was force me to get my paperwork perfect. Every permit, every registration, every old document stuffed in boxes, and drawers got pulled out, sorted, copied, verified. One folder turned into 2 binders. Then I added something else, a spiral notebook, dates, comments, phone calls, little things that didn't look important alone but started to form a pattern when you laid them end to end. That notebook saved me later. Then Vivian shifted tactics. She organized what she called a beautification effort, which was just a polished way of saying she got people from the subdivision to photograph my fence line and complain in bulk that my farm didn't match the character of their neighborhood. She brought the whole performance to a county commissioner meeting. 17 people showed up. Most of them left early. The commission chair listened for about 8 minutes, then pointed out that my property was protected under Tennessee's right to farm law. In plain English, that means you don't get to move next to an existing farm and then act shocked that farms smell like farms and look like farms. Vivian didn't like that answer, so she moved on to whisper campaigns. According to her, I was hostile, uncooperative, threatening. One rumor claimed I had intimidated a neighbor. That neighbor was Bertram, a retired civics teacher who bought eggs for me twice a week and had the moral backbone of a good fence post. He called me personally to say he'd told Vivian her claims were defamatory. I wrote that down, too. Then she found what she thought was her big break. Buried in old county records was a loan my father had taken out in 1987, long since paid off. But the satisfaction document had been misindexed years earlier when the county digitized records. On paper, if you were determined to be dishonest, it looked like unresolved debt. Vivian found an attorney reckless enough to file a cloud-on title action over it. That's when I called my cousin Adeline. Adeline Briggs Tanner is a property lawyer in Chattanooga, and she is one of those people who can make you feel safe and scolded in the same breath. She read the filing and said, "Dell, this is the dumbest thing I've seen in months, but it can still hurt you." She was right. I was in the middle of negotiating a 3-year supply contract with an agricultural co-op, and the minute their lawyers saw active title litigation, they froze the deal. Just like that, Vivian cost me a contract worth real money without winning a thing in court. So I drove to Chattanooga, spread my binders across Adeline's table, and we went to work. The title company confirmed the lien had been satisfied decades earlier. Adeline got the record corrected, counterclaimed for fees, and filed a professional complaint against Vivian's attorney for filing garbage without doing real due diligence. Within 45 days, the case collapsed. The co-op deal came back. I signed it. At that point, a normal person might have backed off. Vivian was not a normal person. She went after the gravel road along my eastern fence line next. Folks from the subdivision had used it informally for years as a shortcut. I'd never objected because being neighborly seemed easier than being difficult. Vivian tried to turn that courtesy into a prescriptive easement claim, arguing the HOA had earned a legal right to the road and that I might be forced to maintain it to county standards. That would have cost me a fortune. Adeline shut that down with a move, so simple, it was almost beautiful. We posted a sign stating that use of the road was by my permission and could be withdrawn at any time, then sent certified letters to all 42 households saying the same thing. Permission kills the hostile use element and easement claim needs. End of story. By then I understood something ugly but useful. I couldn't just survive Vivian one attack at a time. That wasn't strategy. That was slow bleeding. I needed to end it. So I started working with Patricia Swell, the county agriculture extension agent, on a permanent conservation easement through the USDA program. The payment mattered some, sure, but the real value was protection. Once recorded, my land could never be developed or turned into subdivision overflow. Ever. Federal protection outranks HOA fantasies every day of the week. That process uncovered the twist that explained everything. Adeline, digging through old annexation records, found a clause from 2003 buried in a long county agreement. It mentioned stormwater standards for parcels in the corridor near the subdivision, including some of the existing non-residential use. My farm was in that corridor. It was almost certainly sloppy drafting, but it gave Vivian something she thought she could weaponize. And when Adeline cross-checked that clause against Vivian's earliest complaints, she found the exact language had been there from the beginning. That woman had been building toward this for nearly 2 years. The inspection parade, the title suit, the easement claim, all of it was groundwork. She wanted a paper trail that made me look like a non-compliant problem. So when she finally pushed the stormwater issue, I'd already looked guilty on paper. But she made 2 mistakes. First, she tipped her hand too early. Second, she didn't read the full clause. It only applied with my written consent or court finding of actual drainage impact. She had neither, and if she took it to court, discovery would expose her whole campaign. So we got quiet. Adeline and her paralegal built a full exhibit package from everything I'd saved. Inspections, letters, court records, notebook entries, witness notes, the works. Patricia kept the conservation easement moving. The Tennessee Farm Bureau got interested. Bertram quietly started documenting what Vivian said in HOA meetings. We were ready. What I didn't know was that Vivian had already run out of patience. She found a demolition contractor named Dwayne Pitt, who also happened to be her second cousin, and got him to write a bogus letter claiming my barn was structurally unsound. The county looked at it, compared it to real inspections, and ignored it. So at 5:47, on a Tuesday morning in February, she stopped trying to get permission and sent the truck. You already know what that sounded like. What I haven't told you is that the barn didn't fall. My grandfather built it with double framing because he trusted storms about as much as he trusted politicians. The truck punched a hole through the south wall, cracked 2 uprights, then backed out and ran. I got outside, looked at that torn cedar, the frozen ground ripped up by tires, the sky showing to my grandfather's wall. And what I felt wasn't rage. Not first. It was clarity. I called Adeline, then the sheriff, then the Farm Bureau, then Howard Cobb, who said, "I'll be there in 40 minutes. The truck was found before breakfast. Dwayne had tried peeling the company decals off after the fact, which is a kind of criminal thinking that only works in your own head. Deputies found him eating breakfast at his yard 17 miles away. After that, things moved fast. Vivian tried to spin it at an emergency HOA board meeting, claiming it was a misunderstood safety action. The board stared at her like people waking up from a bad investment. One board member, Hartwell, hit record on his phone and stated for the minutes that he had never authorized heavy equipment on private property. The others agreed. Then came the settlement offer. She dropped the covenant claims, pay part of repairs, and both sides would sign a mutual silence agreement. Adeline called me and said she's scared. We don't settle. Then came the fake online posts. Then a last-minute petition against my conservation easement. Then, unbelievably, an attempt to influence Howard Cobb through a landscaping contract offered to his brother-in-law. Howard reported that to the county ethics office before sunset. That's when the whole thing finally cracked open in public. At Harlan County Agricultural Heritage Day, with 600 or 700 people packed into that exhibition hall smelling like hay, dust, machine oil, and fried food, Patricia announced my farm's conservation easement had been approved. I stood beside her. Then a local reporter laid out the timeline, the inspections, the bad faith lawsuits, the easement stunt, the buried annexation clause, the false condemnation letter, the truck, the ethics complaint. Flat voice, clean facts, nowhere for Vivian to hide. Then Hartwell stood up in front of that whole room and moved to table any HOA response pending the ethics investigation. The board members with him raised their hands. Motion carried. Right there, in public, with cameras rolling. Vivian sat down and never really got back up from that. Not in any way that mattered. In the months after, Dwayne took a plea deal. Restitution paid for the barn repairs. A carpenter matched the old cedar. So clean you can't tell where the damage was unless I point out. The district attorney never charged Vivian directly, but the ethics findings were bad enough. She'd spent around $14,000 in HOA dues on a private war against my farm without proper board approval. She was forced to repay it and barred from holding HOA office for 5 years. She resigned that same day. Her house went up for sale in July. She was gone by August. The conservation easement was recorded for good. My land will stay farmland, no matter who owns it after me. And maybe the strangest part is this. After all that spite, all that damage, all that effort to erase something old and decent, the thing that lasted wasn't her campaign. It was a farm. It was the barn. It was a paper trail. It was a truth, written down carefully enough that nobody could smother with noise. I used part of the easement payment to start a scholarship in my grandfather's name for local kids going into agriculture or rural land management. That felt right to me. Maybe because by the end of all this, I understood something I hadn't fully put words to before. Some people fight for land because of money. Some fight for control. But some of us fight because the place holds the memory of everybody who built us. And once you understand that, you stop apologizing for defending it. The farm is still here. 40 acres, Black Angus, pond, eye fields, produce stand, cedar barn standing where it's always stood, smelling like wood and old oil and hot summer dust. And every now and then, when I walk past a repaired south wall, I think about a woman in bunny slippers who believed the truck could do what 2 years of paperwork couldn't. She was wrong. So let me ask you this. When somebody uses rules, money, and position to try to crush something they were never entitled to control, where do you think the line is between justice and payback? And have you ever had to fight that hard just to keep what was already yours?